Good afternoon. I want to welcome you here, and I thank you for coming. As many of you know, I think most of you, I'm Rachel Tierney, a resident here at Loomis Village, and one of my interests has been work helping people who have dementia, whether from Alzheimer's disease or from something else. My husband had Alzheimer's disease, and he was at home with me for 7 years before he went to the Holyoke Soldiers Home for the last 6 months of his life. And Carol Constant, many of you know from previous showings here, as well as those of you who've been here for a while know that Carol was our Director of Development and Community Engagement. So she's had a long history with the Loomis communities, and it's always wonderful to see her back, have her come back to help share the knowledge that she knows. And I'll let Carol say more about your background so that you can let them know who you are.
Well, anybody who knows Rachel knows that she's quite an instigator, and she and she instigated me on this some 7 years ago on the whole idea of dementia friendly, and I'll tell you, it really connected with me, and I have really enjoyed doing this kind of work, and especially doing it with Rachel. So thanks for having me. So I am so since in the past 7 years, I've become a certified dementia practitioner, Alzheimer's Association family support volunteer, savvy caregiver instructor, a dementia friend champion, and a former dementia caregiver. That was before 7 years. So today we're going to explore how communication changes over the course of Alzheimer's disease and how we as neighbors can be helpful and useful in that work. So our goal today, by the end of this session, we're hoping you'll be able to understand the communication changes that are necessary to take place over the course of disease, to decode the verbal and behavioral messages delivered by someone with dementia and find helpful ways to respond to that and identify strategies to connect and communicate. But one important thing that I want to say, there's a lot of those that'll pop up for both Rachel and I, is the idea of a good quality of life with dementia. And one important thing to know is that it takes 8 to 10 years from the time someone gets a dementia diagnosis till it ultimately becomes the cause of their death. So how as we as neighbors can be with these people and support them in a way that's useful for them and their caregivers. So that's what this is about. So communication is a lot more than talking and listening. We send and receive messages through our tone of voice, our body language, and our facial expressions. We're all familiar with that. As the disease progresses, people lose the ability to speak and decode messages, and communicating becomes more nonverbal and increasingly important using nonverbal expression, because the ability to pick up the tone of voice and the nonverbal communication remains intact much longer. So, and while another sidebar, while we're on the subject, it is a good time if you are having memory challenges or someone that you love is having memory challenges, it's a good idea to get it checked out by a doctor. There are reversible things, which that's always good news. Is it a medication interaction? Or is it just going to be useful for us to know ahead of time, to plan, to make our wishes known for the kind of care that we want to receive, and to, as Rachel did with her husband, do the fun things sooner than later. So we'll talk about the early stage, the middle stage, and the late stage. So in the early stage, there may be very few noticeable changes in communication. This is a good time to talk about those future care needs. But as the disease progresses, communication moves from easy conversation to needing to rely on the emotions and the five senses. And as time goes on, it becomes more and more our role as caregivers to adjust the way we communicate. As friends and care partners and caregivers, it's important to remember that the essence of the person continues. And so therefore the golden rule really applies. Treat the person with dignity and respect that they deserve. A dementia-friendly community focuses on the positive and works to recognize what remains of the person rather than what is missing. Even people who have dementia can feel joy, comfort, and a sense of belonging. So in the early stages, you might notice people have a difficulty finding the right words. They take longer to respond or to speak. They might withdraw from the conversation if it is difficult to interpret, decode the language, and then come back with an answer. You can see why participating in a fast-paced conversation would be challenging. And they start to struggle with decision-making or problem-solving skills. But everyone is different, and every day might be different. As Rachel says, if you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia. So it will look different in different people, in different situations, and from day to day. So one day might be a great day. We got lots of good REM sleep last night, and another day may be just exhausting, and it's hard to keep up. So some people may be unaware of the changes that are happening to them, and some people are very aware and very embarrassed or ashamed. So we want to work to destigmatize this and not let people feel ashamed of a disease that's out of their control. And then again, as caregivers, we have to start to think about and deal with our emotions and how we feel when a dementia diagnosis, what it means to the caregivers. So I will let Martha Tierney, who works at the National Office of the Alzheimer's Association, say something about this.
Communicating in the early stages of dementia with the person with the disease is important. At that time, you still have language as a tool, so you can learn things about what they might prefer as the disease progresses. For example, as the disease progresses, a person might have difficulty finding words. Caregivers often struggle to know what to do in that moment. Early on in the disease, you can ask. You can say, if you ever have trouble coming up with a word, would you rather that I jump in and give you the word, or do you want me to wait and allow you some time so you can find it on your own?
So it's valuable as in communication in the early stages, as Martha says, ask directly, how can I help? How can I be helpful? Keep sentences clear and straightforward. Leave plenty of time for conversation. It can take 20 seconds, up to 20 seconds for someone to hear a question, process the question, then process the answer. And I feel like if you've seen any of our presentations, this is a pretty regular thing that we do. But if I asked you, what did you want for lunch, and I waited 20 seconds, so you get the sense that you need to slow things down a little bit. We get very fast paced in our world, and so leave plenty of time for conversation, and include a person in the conversation. who likes to be talked over, talked past, especially when it's something about us. So include the person in the conversation. Avoid making assumptions. Because someone is saying something that isn't clear, don't assume what they're saying. Ask, give them time to clarify what it is that's on their mind. Speak directly. And some of this gets a little redundant, but we'll bear with me. And communicate in a way that's comfortable for the person. Do they prefer in person? Do they like Zooms? Who likes Zooms? Do they like to talk on the phone? Is email easier for them? Whatever it is, however that you can. And don't forget to laugh together. So the South Hadley Senior Center has a memory cafe. And as caregivers, we often get so caught up in the day-to-day caregiving that we forget to have fun with the person that we care about. So it's important to find that time to just be together and enjoy each other's company. The Memory Cafe is twice a month, and there's all kinds of activities. You go in with your person you're caring for, and there's music, there's a sing-along, or there's games, or there's movement, or maybe a craft. It's different every week. And be honest, laugh together. You know, some situations are going to come up that can be pretty funny. So find ways to stay connected. And it's also a good idea to start to eliminate distractions. You know, how many of us have a blaring radio or a blaring TV, or you know, need to talk and there's some other distraction going on. So find ways to have the conversations and be together without a lot of distractions. And Rachel has something.
I just wanted to let you know that for me, one of the things that I learned early on, painfully, was patience. That is not my forte, whatever. It's not my strong point, at least it wasn't. But I kept getting frustrated because Jim would ask the same question that I had just answered 5 times, 10 times. And one thing that was very helpful to me when I was complaining about this one day to a friend, she said, remember, Rachel, for you, it's the 50th time, but for him, it's always the first time. And that was a very important thing for me to hear, because then I could take it out of between him and me and say, this is the disease. It's not Jim personally, it's the disease. And that was helpful in a lot of instances, but that's one that I certainly remember, and I was delighted to get that unsolicited advice.
So yes, and so we'll talk a little bit more about, you know, those kinds of things that are sort of upsetting. But sometimes when someone asks a question, many times it's around something that they're thinking about, they're worried about. For example, they found out there's a family party on Saturday and it's Tuesday, but they don't want to miss it, so they'll ask again and again about it. Or they're worried about paying bills or something else that's coming up for them. So sometimes if you can step back and find out what it is that's on their mind that may be causing all these questions, and then redirect, you know, we'll get into that too. So now into the middle stages, someone will start to have more difficulty finding the right words. They might use familiar words more repeatedly, or they'll invent a new word, like instead of a wristwatch, it's a hand clock. You know, all these Loomis people and the people that you hang around and you're with are very bright. So we have lots of vocabulary, and so if we can't think of one word, we'll come up with another one. And so that's okay, you know, and sometimes these overlearned, so that's okay, give people time to come up with the right word. The other thing is that we have a lot of overlearned behaviors. Our mamas taught us to be nice and polite, so when someone asks us, how are you, we say, we're fine. And then when they ask you, how's the weather, you say, it's raining, or whatever it is. We do these niceties. And so you can expect to have people who you don't see very often not notice that anything's going on, because those overlearned conversations are so much a part of what we do when we run into someone at the supermarket or in the dining room. But it's easier for a person to lose their train of thought. They, again, speak less frequently. This is becoming more challenging. And communication might start to happen through behavior rather than words. So, for example, they're uncomfortable and they can't, you know, they might be angry, they might be hungry, they might be hangry. You know, they're in pain somewhere. It becomes harder and harder for them to use the words to tell you what's going on. So their behavior is a reflection of it. They might start to pace, or something else is going on. I feel like there's people in this room who could be giving this this presentation, as well as Rachel. So, but if anything changes very suddenly, of course consult your doctor, because that person may not be able to tell you that it hurts when they pee, and they might have a UTI or something else going on. Just make sure I got everything here. So it may be during this time that people revert to their native language, or their personality changes. They might start to swear when they were always very polite little church ladies. They might, they have difficulty organizing words logically, and they have difficulty decoding conversations. So Beverly is going to talk about, was a family caregiver for her husband, and now she does a support group. So she'll talk a little bit about the dynamics of marriage.
I would advise couples, and I usually do advise the caregiver who comes to the group and is caring for a spouse, that you take your time. Always count to 3 before you respond, because it gives you time to think about your answer and what's going on. Generally, in a marital dispute, it's quick. It's back and forth. You're quick to give an answer. When they've been diagnosed, to sit back and say, okay, you're supposed to be the one that's reasonable here. Let's change how we do this, because there's only one thing you can control, and that's you. You cannot control them and their process.
So that's really helpful. So if a situation isn't going well, change what you're doing, change how you're communicating, change the setting, move to a different room. In the Savvy Caregiver class that I teach, one of the things that we talk to caregivers about is to be a detective about a behavior that comes up. So think back when someone reacts to something negatively, to what happened before that. Was it that they didn't, that again, I'm thinking of hangry, but what is it that happened before that might have added to the reaction that they had? Was there suddenly a doorbell that rang, or a barking dog, or whatever it is, so that it can help you start to plan to prevent that from happening again. And then redirect their attention, redirect their behavior, change the room, change the setting. So let's see if we can get this. Okay, here we go. More communication in the middle stage. So one of the things that happens with dementia, it affects more than memory. We did that in June, right? So it impacts more than memory. So it also impacts a lot of things. So approach from the front if you are talking to someone. Say who you are, give your name, call the person by the name, make eye contact with them, and if you're not at their eye level, get to their eye level. Avoid criticizing, correcting, and arguing. Oh, I forgot to say, did I say I was a dementia caregiver? I remember my aunt was living with my mother-in-law, and she would always correct her. It didn't happen that way. It was this, it was that. But what's the point? Ask yourself if it really matters who is correct about a situation, and join them in their reality. And pay attention to your tone. As we said, those are things that we notice. We notice them in each other. We know when somebody's grouchy or when somebody's having a bad day. We can tell by their body language. We can tell by their tone of voice. And so, and that is something that someone with dementia also picks up on. And then take your time. And it's probably on every slide. Take your time, take your time. So let's hear from another caregiver. She's another family caregiver.
She could sense my frustration because occasionally I would lose my patience and I would bark at her. Why are you asking me that question again? I just answered that question 2 minutes ago. And then she would get frustrated because, you know, she was very old school and she's like, don't disrespect me. And I didn't ask you that question 2 minutes ago. It's a new question. So phase 2 of our relationship was like, okay, that's a new question. I'll answer it again.
And that can be frustrating, as Rachel said. So, let's see if we get this slide to move. Do you want to say something? Rachel, that's her job, to include anything that I might, include anecdotes or anything I might forget.
Well, I was going to include an anecdote, but now I've lost my train of thought. And I'm serious. I mean,
Take your time, Rachel.
thank you, Jean. I appreciate you're gonna wait 20 seconds?
Yeah.
Oh, I know. It was in the middle stage that oftentimes individuals start losing track of the reality of their life, of their world. And my husband sometimes would say, well, where are the children? Well, his children by this time were all out of college and many of them married. But I realized he was talking about school because he had been superintendent of schools. He'd seen each one of them go off to school. And I said, well, I don't think school's out yet. And he would very easily go on and forget that that had been a conversation. But that's an example of you don't pound reality into, or try to pound reality into the other person's brain. It worked just fine. Now we call them little fiblets, which some people have trouble with because of their upbringing and their ethics about not telling a lie, not misleading people. And I had trouble with this for a number of reasons. But I finally convinced myself that it would be something that would make life easier for both of us if I used it. So I did. Another thing was, he'd say, well, I'd like to go visit my mother. Now, she, of course, had been gone for, well, 60 years or more, probably. And it would not have done him any good for me to say, well, she's dead. She's been gone 60 years, to try to convince him of the reality. But I could say, well, I don't think she can visit today. So a little tinge of reality there. But so needing to come up with comments about the conversation that might make you think like you're telling a lie. But what you're really doing is not getting into a discussion about who's right. Because that really doesn't matter at this point. So those were the things I was going to say.
So, thank you, Rachel. So yeah, that's a really good examples of entering their reality. So assess their needs. Is something going on that they can't say? And if they're upset about something, try and hear where they are coming from. We all want to be heard. Even if I can't fix a problem for my friend, or my friend can't fix a problem for me, if I feel like I've been heard, like this is how I feel, it helps a lot. So we all we all deserve to be heard. So even if you can't fix a problem for them, just for the person you're caring for, listen to what they have to say, and provide brief answers. Again, if you need to provide an answer and you need to repeat it again, or ask the question again in the same way, because the more vocabulary that you would use by rephrasing the question or the answer, just adds to the confusion and the word salad. So, and respond to the emotions behind the statements. What are they feeling? Are they upset? What's happening? So, use short sentences and basic words. I just said that. Speak clearly and slowly. One person, one question at a time. Limit distractions. There's that blaring TV. Be patient. Take your time. Did it say take your time? It said take your time. Offer to guess or fill in the words if they're comfortable with that. Do you want me to help? Do you mean this? In a very simple and non-confrontational way. Connect and give multiple cues. So, for example, because language becomes hard, use visual cues and gestures like, okay, we're going to, the restroom is this way, or here's your code. Use your gestures and visual cues. Avoid sudden movements that startle. And sometimes you can write things down. So, today is at noon, we're meeting Sally for lunch, and then at 3 o'clock we have a doctor's appointment. Put that on the kitchen table so that they can refer to that if they're thinking about what's happening. Put your answers into question. Put answers into your questions. So, for example, instead of what do you want for lunch, say, I'm going to make lunch. Would you like turkey or ham sandwich? And so you give them a chance to choose what it is that, or do you want to wear the red shirt or the blue shirt today? Whatever it is, give them put an answer in it. Repeat as needed. Turn negatives into positives. So Cindy's coming this afternoon. Let's get cleaned up before she gets here. Your daughter Cindy's coming this afternoon. Let's get cleaned up, instead of we got to take a bath. Baths are usually a real challenge for people who have dementia. They're not happy about them. So give them a positive reason to want it. And I heard a great one in one of the sessions I attended that said, look, let's just wash your face. And then just wash the face. Oh, dirt on your neck. Oh, and if nothing else, if you can't get them in the shower, they end up having a sponge bath. So, move slow. And avoid quizzing. We've gone over that. So, one of the things that we also introduce with the Savvy Caregiver class is the concept of contented involvement. So how can you engage the person wherever they are and whatever you're doing? How can they be part of what's happening? So whether it's an ADL, and activity of daily living, so you can't send them into the bathroom anymore and say brush your teeth. You go in and you put the toothpaste on the toothbrush and then they can brush your teeth. So whatever it is that they need to do, give them a part of it where they can feel successful. Making a meal, maybe they can peel the carrots or doing yard work. Whatever it is that you're doing that we need to do as caregivers, how can you engage them at a level that they can feel successful? And because we all need to be feel valued and included.
One of the things that I learned, and I still don't remember how I learned it, was that Jim liked to fold things. I don't remember noticing this before he had Alzheimer's disease, but anyway, I noticed it. And I realized that he would fold washcloths very neatly. Excuse me. Sorry. If I gave him a basket of messed up washcloths, he would fold them very neatly and put them in a pile and put them back in the closed basket. And I would kindly thank him and take it away. And a few minutes later, I'd bring him back the messed up basket of washcloths, because he was very content doing that, perhaps watching TV or just watching me if I was making a meal. It was just very interesting to me that he was very content doing that. It was kind of soothing for him. Something I hadn't even thought of. Excuse me, thank you.
So, to review and join their reality, provide reassurance that you hear and understand, focus on the feelings, not the facts, and validate and redirect the person as needed. So now in the late stages, we're going to start to say communication is really difficult. There might be just a few words or sounds, but it is possible to pull up those overlearned things. So familiar words or phrases or songs. So maybe you could start the Lord's Prayer or some other phrase that they had memorized since the time they were 5 years old. Listen for expressions of pain and respond promptly if they look uncomfortable. They may not be able to tell you how uncomfortable they are, so it's a good idea to respond. And help the person feel safe and happy. So this is a big part of the late stage, how to make people feel safe and comfortable and cared for. Continue to bring respect into the conversation and keep talking. Read a story, just whatever it is that you can do. Start to tell stories about memories, whether it's you're a caregiver who's a neighbor or a friend. You can tell your own stories or you can tell shared stories. And use all 5 senses to communicate. So we're going to get into that and see what that looks like after Sandra talks about her.
I know that my mom feels aggravated. I know that she feels alone. I know that she feels confused. And I know on any given day, I don't know if I've made it better for her. I try. In these later stages, I've come to recognize that being really aware of the 5 senses is really important. Touch seems to give her a great deal of comfort. I know when I come over, I'm going to brush her hair all the time. My husband noted to me recently, he said, you should see the look on your mom's face when you're brushing her hair. She's just happy. She's just happy. She doesn't say a lot. And I do it for a long period of time. I comb it, I braid it, I do funny things with it, but it just allows me to just be with her in a way that makes her feel comfortable.
So this makes me think of one of my favorite quotes, and it's Maya Angelou. And you may have heard it, I'm sure you have, especially if you've been hanging around me for very long. I'm may not remember what you said or did, but I always will remember how you made me feel. So that's where that's deep within us. So how do we connect through the five senses? So in the late stage, through touch. So they have fiddle blankets where you can feel different things, fiddle scarves I heard about. I haven't seen one. I've seen a fiddle blanket. And hand massages, lotions, this woman combed her mother's hair. Identified everyday items in a bag by touch, visiting with animals, sculpting, and just comfort. Holding the person's hand, stroke their arm or back. Just the presence of you. If you're having a hard time processing the world around you, how can you just be in their presence and have them be comfortable? So, using sight. So, you know, those big coffee table books with all the photos of beautiful places in the world, or paintings, photo albums are also really good. Go outside, go bird watching. I love my bird feeder in the winter. I hope nobody ever takes it away from me. Or if you can get out, go to an aquarium or go somewhere where you can watch things that are moving and going around. They have coloring books that you can just dip the paint in with brush and water, and it fills in the colors. Or just go outside and sit outside on a beautiful day, or near an open window. Through sound, listen to familiar music. There's the iPod project, where there was a gentleman who would load an iPod with the music of someone's generation, whether they loved the big band music, or they loved the 50s swing, or whatever the music is that they love, put it in iPod. And there was actually a video of this gentleman who had been a jazz musician, and when they played the music that he loved, he came up with the words, even though he had been nonverbal. So music is deep within our psyche. So that's a wonderful way to pull a person out. If someone has a different native language, listens to songs or tapes in that native language. Sometimes people will revert to their native language. Again, we're going back a little bit in time with our memories. So why Rachel's husband was looking for his mother, and why people revert to a native language. This is deeper within their memory. Again, the sound of your voice, depending on what you can read in the newspaper that would be relaxing for both you and them. Find something fun to read, and just let them hear your voice. Just let them be in their presence. In the late stage, through smell, of course there's all kinds of great smells in this world that we can enjoy. So aromatherapy is a really wonderful thing that's being utilized. So put something lovely to smell, sniff in a bag or in a cup. Fragrant lotions for hand massages, or just make some applesauce, apple pie, or chicken soup. Those are all good things for a cold October day, right? And then taste. The sense of taste, both salty and sweet, is something that remains the longest. My mother-in-law had another thing that you'll find is someone who's in the later stages have a hard time swallowing. So we used to bring her puddings with whipped cream on them, and she would enjoy those. So, in summary, join the person in their reality, and this is for all stages. Understand and accept what you can and cannot change. Remember that the person retains their sense of self despite the losses of the disease. Demonstrate respect and connect through feelings. Try to decode the person's communications and treat them as the adult that they are. It's not a role reversal for our children. They're not going to be, we're not their kids anymore. I was always really trying to be mindful of that when I was caring for my mom. Recognize the effects of your mood and your actions. Try to understand the source of their reactions, and help them meet the needs while be the calming person who can help them soothe them and help them meet their needs. So I think I might have. So one of the things that I want to say here, we're going to let this man talk about being the importance of the caregiver, taking care of the caregivers. So you've heard the expression, you can't pour from an empty cup. So this is even more so for somebody who's a dementia caregiver. Dementia caregivers are twice as likely to have physical or psychological problems. And then as a result, twice as likely to need medication for those things. They're at much higher risk for social isolation and higher risk for economic distress. This particularly comes in families where a younger family member has to work part-time and be underemployed and to take care of their person, and they're not making as much money. And they're only half as likely to get care for themselves. It's so demanding to be a caregiver of someone living with dementia that they don't go to the doctor themselves. So they need our support. So I think you all are in such an ideal situation because you live together. So think of your friends and offer to help them. Maybe, can I run an errand for you? Can I sit with your person for an hour while you go take a walk or do something nice for yourself? So this gentleman also works for the national office, is going to say something about that.
Taking care of yourself while you care for somebody with the disease not only impacts your own health, but it really can impact the person with the disease. So for example, if you're not getting enough sleep, you might be easily irritated, which will then sort of spill over to your interactions with the person with the disease and maybe being short with them, which then might cause them to get frustrated. So it's not only important to take care of yourself for your own health, but really for you to really be a good caregiver.
So there's resources out there. And so we include the robust website of the Alzheimer's Association. There's a lot of information there for you and your families. There's a 24/7 hotline. Person doesn't have to have an Alzheimer's diagnosis to use and utilize these resources. And the 24 helpline can be really helpful for any question. The people who answer the phone are experienced and have worked professionally as caregivers. So you can call and say it's 2 a.m. and my person won't go to sleep and I don't know what to do, I'm exhausted. Or you can call and say, the doctor told me this and I think I need a second opinion. How do I go about getting a second opinion? So utilize that as a resource. The other resource is on the back of the sheets. There's a cheat sheet I gave you. With the back, there's West Mass Elder Care is Lisa here is your #1 go-to person. She can help connect you with the services that you might need here and also beyond, as well as West Mass Elder Care. And the Senior Center has someone who can help with those questions too. And there's also information about the caregiver support group that they have at the Senior Center. So every Wednesday morning, there's a chance, whether it's to the Memory Cafe or to the support group, to get some help at the Senior Center and have If you haven't been there, it's pretty spiffy. And they invite you, the Alzheimer's Association invites you to get involved. And I know that you all had a wonderful, supportive walk to end Alzheimer's in September, so thank you and congratulations. And again, the hotline. So, any questions? Oh, yeah, oh, okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Rachel's here with the mic. And someone else in the back. Questions, thoughts, input? Yes, Jean.
My brother is dealing with his wife who has not Alzheimer. It's not Alzheimer, but she's pretty far along. And she'll ask questions like, when's my mother coming home? And of course her mother's been dead for 40 years. And I said to him, Ted, you have to say something like, she's probably stuck in traffic, or she hasn't come back from shopping. And his response, oh, I could never lie to her. And I didn't know how to respond to him.
No, that's hard. That's hard. So I remember when my mother-in-law had Alzheimer's disease, I didn't know all this. That we're talking going back 30 years. And she was living with us, and she asked me one day about her mother, and I said, oh, your mom's gone. I mean, I knew nothing about Alzheimer's. Your mom's gone. Well, the look on her face was like she just heard it for the first time. It was awful. You learn instinctively how hard and painful that is. But yeah, that's really hard. He needs to talk to Rachel about the fiblets.
Yes, I think so.
Anybody else have a question or a comment?
The fiblets are sort of hard to grade and to execute, particularly if you have a conscience that tells you you should not lie. And with partners, it's often particularly difficult because you want to reinforce the trust. You don't want to go against whatever sort of pledge you made to each other. Now, one of the pledges most people is to be with you in sickness and in health. But, in sickness doesn't always mean that you need to share all the details. And so that's something just to think about. But it is hard to shift one's way of responding from one of truth to one of sort of feeling the truth, if you will.
I see that this program has been filmed or recorded. I have a friend here who really would have benefited from being here, but I see that she's not here. But she lives here. Is there some way that residents who missed this presentation could watch the recording?
I'm going to pass that to Tyler.
Yes, I believe we will be able to put it up on our YouTube channel, and there should be a link on it to Connected Living if that's what we want to do. So there should be access for residents.
I'm not a caregiver, but I have some friends who live at distances. And I know that they have memory issues. And I'm kind of scared to call them because I don't know how to deal with that. And I'm wondering if you have any advice.
I'm not sure that I understood the middle part of that, which was the critical part.
I'm not a caregiver, but I have friends who live, that I communicate with phone,
Yes.
and I don't know, I haven't talked to them in a long time because I'm a little afraid of initiating a conversation with their
No.
dementia personality.
Okay. Well, what I can encourage you to do is to just call and to say, this is somebody that you haven't heard from in a long time. And I don't know if you'll even remember me, but my name is Bev Weeks, and I knew you when. And together we used to do this, to try to bring up as many cues, to give as many clues as you can about who you are and how you connected with that person in the past. Now, are you concerned because you're afraid they might have cognitive issues, or because you're afraid they're the partner of somebody who has cognitive issues?
It's just that they are, I know they've got Alzheimer's or early dementia, and I don't know what stage I'm going to encounter when I call.
Mhm. I would still suggest that that's the kind of introduction you get, and see what kind of response you get. And don't be disappointed if people say, I have no idea who the hell you are, and they hang up on you. That tells you something. I'm not sure what, but it tells you something.
So that's a really great question, because especially, for example, grandchildren will say, well, Grandma doesn't know who I am, so I don't know why I go. But we love the person because we love the person. We have wonderful, fond memories of being with them. So just giving them that, I've checked in, I'm thinking about you, you're my friend, is a simple enough thing. I don't know that they would, I don't know who would say, I don't know who the hell you are. If you start saying, I remember when we were in first grade and, you know, I was out on the playground and my skirt fell down to my knees. You know, whatever it is that you have memories of sharing with that person. And if it's just a quick check-in because they don't seem to understand or be able to go with you on it, then it's a quick check-in. You've let them know that you care about them and you're thinking about them. That's good for them and it's good for you. I don't know who that is, but it's somebody who liked me.
And I think you will feel better because you have done something rather than just ruminate about it.
Okay, I'm a newcomer here, and I'm just curious. If you live here and you decide, somebody decides that you need to go into a memory care unit, is there something on campus? Is there some association with Loomis Village where our memory care people go?
Well, there isn't a separate place. Actually, when the strategic plan was developed a few years ago, the residents of this community, as well as the two other Loomis communities, said that they really wanted to do all of their aging in place as much as was possible. So one of the focus areas for the strategic plan, which will get kicked back in very soon as we get moving again, is a focus on dementia and how to help people. And this is part of the effort to provide education to people so that when you sit down with somebody at dinner and you have a conversation that doesn't seem quite connected the way you would hope it would be, you might remember some of these things and that they might be helpful to you in supporting the other person or that person's partner.
So yeah, so what part of the strategic plan is that we would be, Loomis, I say we, because Rachel and I were very active, as was Lisa, in putting together this strategic plan. And we were thrilled when the board of directors voted that Loomis would be a dementia inclusive community. So as much as possible, residents and team members would be educated and made aware to make it possible for people to stay independent as long as possible.
And one of the reasons for this being taped is to share it with team members. So that's something for you to know. That's the primary reason why this is being taped, so that as part of their required annual training, team members can have access to this information.
And Tyler's gonna edit out all our foibles and ums and ohs.
Yes, Randy?
At the same time, in response to her question, there are those cases where it becomes clear that something else has to be done, like wanderers. And I know we've had a number of people that have been here for a long time that ended up moving someplace. So I'm assuming that Lisa has, and others have knowledge of places to recommend when confinement has to happen, and it just won't work here anymore. But I applaud the effort we've made to be inclusive here, and there have been a number of residents in my experience now in 7.5 years who I've seen move down that road, and people are very supportive and helpful with them. I think that'll continue to be the case.
Yes. Thank you, Randy. Thank you for this comment. Mary, did you?
I just have a comment. When my husband was in the middle stages, he was using a walker at that point, and he'd wake up 2 or 3 times a week at 2 o'clock in the morning, and he'd have to get up and go to work. So we'd get up and we'd just walk around the apartment, go from room to room, he'd bang into the wall, and he'd back up and go around, and for about an hour, and then he had to go to work, and he would go in the bathroom and pretend to get ready, and we'd come back out. But, well, anyway, by the end of an hour, he was ready and was tired, so he would just automatically head back, and we'd get back and get him back into bed. But you do what you have to do.
Oh my gosh.
That's an interesting anecdote. Thank you for sharing. That
That's,
must have been difficult.
and that must have been hard on your sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's important to know that 6 out of 10 people with Alzheimer's do wander. And when you hear on the news about an elderly person or middle-aged person who's missing, you know, that is one of the concerns, is that they might be somebody with Alzheimer's or other cognitive impairment. And if that's the case, they might be out in their pajamas in this kind of weather, because they would not be dressed appropriately for the weather, for the area, perhaps. The South Hadley Police does have a registration system to register your loved one with the police in the event of wandering or other things.
And the Triad Committee in South Hadley, which is the police, and I forgot the Triad is an acronym for something else, but they're getting a grant for GPS trackers that can be placed on people who have a risk at wandering, so that if they're, you know, and they're going to be offered at no charge. So Lisa, you should find out more about that. I don't think it's ready yet, but it's something that they're working on. And thank goodness it's that way now. I have this watch that I can do just that. You know, and actually if I make a sudden movement, it asks me if I've fallen and starts to dial 911 unless I tell it, no, I didn't fall. So, you know, you could say it's a bad thing, but maybe it's a good thing. So Yeah, so the other thing is that South Hadley has voted to become age or dementia friendly. And so there's some pretty neat initiatives that are coming about. I don't know if you're going to want to hear all this for the employees, but there's a lot to say about that. The department heads are meeting quarterly, and all their goals are aligned with this age and dementia friendly, because a lot of the things that showed up are in the master plan. I don't know if you all remember, right before COVID, the master plan update committee was in here having meetings and asking people everywhere, here and the senior center and the library and town hall, and what they wanted to see for their community going forward. And so many of the things that they asked for are things that fit and align with the age and dementia friendly initiative. So there's some really exciting things that are starting to happen, so to be continued. Any other questions? Oh, yes.
Many years ago, I was in a very awkward situation as a bystander. My husband and I had invited our friends to join us for lunch, and she had dementia of some sort. I don't know what the exact diagnosis was. And while we were waiting, she had, in the restaurant, she had ordered, her husband had ordered for her because she didn't know how to order, and she said, "You know what I like." And it was just a simple sandwich and coffee. The waitress, not knowing the situation, put down a pitcher of milk or cream in front of her, but not the coffee. And my friend got very upset, saying, "This is not coffee," and got more and more agitated. And her husband really didn't know how to handle it. My husband and I had no idea how to handle it, but it became a confrontation between my friend and the waitress. And it just got louder and more upsetting. And, I sat there. I don't know if I did say anything saying, "Marcia, your coffee will be coming," or something. But finally her husband just picked her up and left. And it has haunted me all these years. I said, how could we have handled it better? Do you have any suggestions as to, he did what seemed logical to him by leaving the restaurant.
Well, that may have been the perfect thing to do. One of the initiatives in the Dementia Friendly Initiative is to train wait staff so that they understand and are patient, so that they don't escalate a situation. This not only applies to people who have dementia, but it could be a child with autism or who's on the spectrum. So these, this kind of awareness program is also helpful for the wait staff. Who knows what was going on with your friend? It may have been just the coffee, it may have been something else, and it becomes overwhelming if you can imagine, if you can't process what's happening around you, you are in a new place. It could have been any number of things, and there may have been nothing that you could have done except her husband taking her home. It gets harder and harder for people who are in mid or later stages of dementia to be out anywhere, but only in their own comfortable space.
You thought we were doing a good thing.
That was painful and hard to watch your friend go through that. Anything else? Thank you all. Great comments.